The woman sitting across from Seojin was still speaking, but he had stopped listening somewhere between her third mention of her Pilates instructor and the part where she described her vision board in detail. He was on date number 12. 12 women. One day. His father, Chairman Seo, had apparently woken up that morning, looked at the family empire he had spent 40 years building, and decided the most urgent thing it needed was a daughter-in-law. You will find someone, he had said, from behind his desk like a general issuing orders before a campaign. Or I will find someone for you. Or the company goes to your Uncle Byung. Seojin had stared at him. His Uncle Byung, who had once gotten lost inside a department store for 2 hours, and called it a conspiracy. So here he was. 12th date. Navy suit. A private dining room on the 42nd floor of a hotel, where the menu had no prices, because if you needed to ask, you were already in the wrong chair. And the woman across from him was now telling him that Mercury was in retrograde, and that was probably why her last 3 relationships hadn't worked out. His phone vibrated against his thigh. He glanced down. It was Dammy. He pushed back from the table with a polished, apologetic smile. Forgive me, I need to take this. He stepped out into the corridor, pressed the phone to his ear and said, Yes? Well, hello to you too, Dammy said unbothered. How's the parade going? Seojin leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. I have shaken 12 hands today. I have heard 12 women describe their morning routines. One of them brought a printed copy of her 5-year plan. Dammy went quiet for a second. Then she said, she brought a document? To a date? He said nothing because there was nothing to add to that. There was a pause. Then Dammy said slowly, What if you just got someone to fill the role? What? You heard me. Someone you trust. Someone your family already likes. She plays the girlfriend. Your grandfather backs off, the company transfers, and then a few months later you two have a very dignified and private breakup. Seojin stood very still in that corridor for a long moment. I have to go, he said. He hung up, walked back inside, looked at the woman with the Mercury theory across the table, and said very calmly that something had come up and he was deeply sorry. Then he left the building and pointed his driver toward Zara's office. Zara ran her own events and brand strategy firm out of a converted building in Mapo. The lobby had exposed concrete walls and hanging plants and the kind of intentional aesthetic that said, We are creative but we also have quarterly earnings. The woman at the front desk didn't even reach for the sign-in sheet when she saw him. She's on the 8th floor, Mr. CEO. He took the stairs. He always took the stairs. Zara's office was glassed in at the back of the open floor plan. He could see her through the panels before he even reached the door. She was standing at her standing desk with a headset around her neck, a marker in one hand, and a half-eaten rice ball sitting on top of what appeared to be a very important contract. She had built this company from a single client and a studio apartment, and it now had 4 offices. He had watched her do it. He pushed the door open. She still didn't look up. I'm in the middle of something. I know. Whatever this is, it can wait 15 minutes. It cannot. She finally looked up. She read his face the way she always did, quickly and accurately. Set her marker down. Seojin, she said. What is it? He sat down across from her, put both forearms on her desk, and looked at her steadily. I need you to pretend to be my girlfriend. And before we go any further, if this story already has you sitting up straighter, do us a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and drop a comment below telling us what you would have said if you were Zara in that moment. Because trust us, it is about to get complicated. Now where were we? Zara blinked at him. She pulled the headset fully off her neck and set it on the desk. She said, I'm sorry. You want me to what? Pretend, he said again. To be in a relationship with me. For a few months. Long enough for my grandfather to believe it, hand over the company, and leave me alone. And if I don't show up with someone, the company goes to my Uncle Byung. Zara was quiet for exactly 1 second. Then she said, Uncle Byung who got lost in Latte World for 3 hours? The very same one. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. She was clearly trying very hard not to smile. She failed. She turned it into a cough and straightened up. Okay, she said, but her voice was still fighting the smile. Absolutely not. Seojin. He leaned forward. I have been on 12 dates today. She stopped fighting the smile and just stared at him. 12. In one day. I know which one brought printed materials. I know which one has a cat named after a K-drama character and cried about it when she told me. I know which one believes the universe told her to invest in NFTs. He exhaled slowly. I cannot survive another one of those conversations. I am going to dissolve, Zara. You are not going to dissolve. She kept her voice very straight. But I'm also not going to lie to your entire family. Just for a few months, he said. We date publicly. Grandfather relaxes. The transfer happens. Then we break up very calmly and like adults and go back to exactly this. He gestured between them. Nothing changes. Zara looked at him. Then at her desk. Then at the wall. It is a genuinely bad idea. It is an elegant solution. It's the same thing, Seojin. He held her gaze. You know I wouldn't ask this of anyone else. She knew that was true. That was the problem with it. He was quiet for a moment. Then slowly, with the careful deliberation of a man who had calculated the risk and decided it was worth taking, he stood up, came around to her side of the desk, and lowered himself down onto one knee. Zara's chair rolled back 2 inches. What, she said, her voice going completely flat. What are you doing right now? I'm usken properly. Get off the floor. Say yes and I will. There are people on the other side of that glass panel, she said without moving. I am aware. Seojin. He looked up at her, patient as stone. This is humiliating. For both of us, yes. Then stand up. Say yes first. She looked at him, this man she had known for the better part of her adult life, kneeling on the floor of her own office with complete calm. Like this was perfectly reasonable. She closed her eyes, breathed in, thought about all the sensible, rational reasons to say no. There were many. They were good reasons. She opened her eyes. Fine, she said. He was upright in one motion. He came around and pulled her into a hug before she could form a second thought. The kind of hug he gave when he meant it completely, which was the only way he knew how to hug. You are my favorite person on this earth, he said into her braids. You owe me, she said into his shoulder. Every single thing you have. He let go. And the exhaustion on his face had broken open into something lighter. I'll pick you up at 7. We'll go together. Just say we've been private about it and decided it was time. He patted her shoulder twice. Dress up a bit. She stared at him. I am not taking instructions from you. You're in the arrangement now, Zara. He was already at the door. 7 o'clock. He was gone. She sat back down slowly. She pressed her palms flat on the desk and looked at the surface of it, and listened to her own heartbeat, doing something entirely inconvenient in her chest. She had known Seojin since she was 20. She was 30 now. 10 years. And for 7 of those 10 years, she had been carrying something around with her that she had never once named out loud, had never let herself look at directly, because looking at it would mean admitting it was real. She had managed it so well. She had told herself so many times in so many different ways that she was fine with what they were. That best friend was enough. That she had made peace. And now she had agreed to pretend. She stared at the ceiling for a moment. Then she picked up her marker, looked at the contract under the rice ball, and tried very hard to think about work. She wore an emerald wrap dress and gold earrings that swept her collarbone and her braids pinned up at the back with a few falling loose around her face, clean, confident, not too much. She looked at herself in the mirror and said firmly, "You are doing a favor for a friend. That is all this is." His car was outside at 6:58. He stepped out when he saw her walking down, and for a moment just looked at her. "You look incredible," he said. She adjusted the strap of her bag. "You don't need to do that when no one's watching." He tilted his head. "I'm not doing anything. I'm just telling you the truth." She looked away. They got into the car. The city moved past the windows in long amber and white streaks as evening settled over the streets. "Keep it simple," Seojin said, hands easy on the wheel. "We've been private because of the scrutiny. Decided it was time. Nothing elaborate. The simpler it is, the more real it sounds." "I know how to have a conversation," she said. "I'm not saying you don't. I'm saying don't overfill it. If you explain too much it sounds scripted." She turned to look at him. "It is scripted." He almost smiled. "They don't need to know that." The Seo family home sat behind old stone walls in a neighborhood that had the particular quiet of old money, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from silence, but from everything being exactly where it has always been. They walked to the door side by side. The dining room was long and warm, lit low. Chairman Seo sat at the head of the table, a compact and still man with sharp eyes that had not missed anything in 30 years of running a company and probably longer. His wife sat beside him, watching Zara with the gentle attentiveness of someone who had already formed a view and was waiting to see if she was right. They sat. The food was served. Then Chairman Seo set down his chopsticks, folded his hands, and looked at Zara. "I want to ask you something," he said. "Of course," she said. "You have been in this family for years," he said. "My son has spoken of you more than he has spoken of almost anyone. Why did it take this long?" Zara felt Seo Jin shift slightly beside her. She didn't look at him. She picked up her water glass, set it down again, and thought for exactly one beat. "He asked me to keep it between us," she said calmly. He was cautious about mixing what we had with the expectations of the family. She felt rather than saw Seo Jin turn to look at her. She continued to look at his grandfather. "He's always been protective of things that matter to him," Chairman Seo said. "Seo Jin." It was quiet, almost amused. The younger man cleared his throat beside her. She still didn't look at him. "How long?" the chairman asked her. She folded her hands in her lap. "A while," she said. "These things don't always have a clean start date." He considered that. Then he said, "How do I know this is real?" The table stilled. Zara looked at him steadily. She said, "I'll tell you something true." He listened. She breathed in slowly. "He is," she said, "one of the most relentlessly present people I have ever known. When things are difficult, he doesn't ask you how you are from across a room. He shows up." She paused. "When I lost my father," she continued, her voice staying level though something in her chest did not, "I didn't call him. I didn't call anyone. He found out anyway. And he was at my door that same evening. He didn't need me to explain anything. He just stayed." She stopped. "I could say many things about him, but that is the one that has always stayed with me." The room was quiet. Chairman Seo looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to his son. He shook his head slowly, but there was something warm underneath it. "She is far too good for the amount of trouble you have caused her." Seo Jin's grandmother, who had been listening from the other end of the table with her chin resting on her hand, laughed. The tension at the table dissolved like mist. Dinner continued. Chairman Seo told a story. His wife topped up everyone's drinks. By the time they were finishing, it was past 10 and the night had gone long and soft at its edges. The grandmother reached across and covered Zara's hand with hers. "Don't go home tonight," she said simply. "It's too late. You'll stay here." Zara opened her mouth. "We don't want to be any trouble." "Trouble?" The older woman waved her hand. "This house has 16 rooms and 2 people in it. It is not trouble, it is company." She was already standing, already gesturing toward the hallway. "Come, I'll show you." Seo Jin caught Zara's eye as they stood. He gave a very small shrug that said, "Just go with it." They followed his grandmother down a warm, lamplit hallway to a guest room at the end. It was large and tasteful with a window overlooking the garden and one bed. A generous bed. But one. Zara looked at it. She looked at Seo Jin. He looked at the ceiling briefly. His grandmother stood at the doorway and said warmly, "I'll have towels and things sent. You don't need to be formal, you're together." She smiled at Zara in the particular knowing way of older women who see everything. And then she was gone. Zara turned to Seo Jin and kept her voice very quiet. "One room." He closed the door. "I know." He stepped past her into the room. "I'll take the floor. We've done it before." She stood with her arms crossed. "Name one time." "Second year. Your apartment lost power in winter, and we all camped in Dammy's place and the floor ran out. I slept against the bookshelf. You slept on a cushion an inch from my head." She remembered. She exhaled. He took the blanket from the top shelf of the closet and the spare pillow from the bed, and arranged them on the floor with the efficient calm of someone who had clearly done this before. She took the bathroom first. When she came out, the lights were low and he was already on the floor on his back, one arm behind his head. She got into the bed, pulled the cover up, and stared at the ceiling. Do you remember? Seo-jin said from the floor. The conference in Busan? She stared upward. The hotel overbooked? The hotel overbooked, he said. And they gave us one room with a single bed and a balcony view that neither of us looked at because we were arguing about whose fault it was for missing the original reservation. You booked it, she said. I confirmed it. That is the same thing. It is absolutely not the same thing. She heard the smile in his voice. We ended up eating ramen on the balcony at midnight anyway. She almost smiled. The ramen was good. It was very good. Silence. She could hear his breathing slow and deepen as sleep reached him. She turned her head and looked at him. The low light, the still room, the familiar shape of him. She had done this before, watched him sleep in the particular quiet way of someone who had no idea they were being looked at. She had done it for years. She knew she would be awake for a long time after. She was right. She was back in her own office by 8:30 the next morning. Glasses on. Laptop open. Acting like a perfectly ordinary person who had spent the previous night in perfectly ordinary circumstances. She was midway through a brand deck when her assistant knocked once, and came in carrying an arrangement of flowers so large she had to hold it with both arms. Deep orange and white, wrapped in dark craft paper. Her assistant set it on the corner of her desk with the expression of someone trying very hard not to react to it. These just arrived. Zara looked at them for a moment. Found the card tucked in the stems. Pulled it out. Because your office needed color, and you would never buy them yourself. She read it twice. Put the card down. Her phone lit up. It was him. Did you find them? She typed back. You didn't have to do this. He replied. Yes, I did, it's part of the setup. She looked at that for a moment. Then she typed. We don't need to perform when no one is watching. He replied almost immediately. Who said I was performing? She turned the phone face down. She turned it face up again. She looked at the flowers on the corner of her desk, bright and completely unbothered by the complicated situation they had walked into. She put the phone face down again. She said to herself quietly and with great conviction. This is temporary. This is an arrangement. You know exactly who he is and what this is, and you are going to be sensible about it. She said it firmly. It did almost nothing. 20 minutes later, a new message. Sunday. Somewhere we can be seen. Keep it convincing. She looked at the flowers. She looked at the message. She started typing no. Deleted it. Started typing I'm busy. Deleted that too. She typed fine. She would later identify that as the beginning of the unraveling. The second mistake was the yellow dress. It was Sunday, it was bright and hot, and she wore a yellow sundress because it was that kind of day, full stop, for no other reason whatsoever. She was walking out of her building toward where his car was idling at the curb when he stepped out. Simple black shirt. Sleeves pushed up. He walked toward her with his hands in his pockets, and something about the directness of the way he moved, of the way he was just looking at her like that, made her want to take one step back. She held her ground. He reached her. He was close, closer than she had braced for, close enough that she caught the edge of his cologne. And her heart did something sideways and unreliable. His hand came up slowly. She went very still. He reached past her ear, and lifted something out of her hair, a small leaf, from the potted plant by her building entrance. He held it up. She looked at it. He looked at her. You had something, he said simply. She breathed. I know, she said, which was not entirely true. They walked to the car. The afternoon was a gallery opening in Hannum. All clean white walls and wine glasses, and the particular social performance of Seoul's creative class. He kept close. At some point, without either of them deciding on it, her arm was through his. She told herself it was for the audience. She kept telling herself that for the next 3 hours, through 2 glasses of wine and a conversation with a sculptor who spoke exclusively in metaphor, and a quiet moment they spent standing in front of a painting neither of them understood, but both pretended to consider very seriously. At one point he leaned in to say something about the painting, just a murmured comment at her ear, and she laughed, and he looked at her when she laughed with an expression she had never seen him point at her before and didn't know what to do with. She filed it away. She did not examine it. She was very disciplined about not examining it. That was a Sunday. By the following Friday, His grandmother had called her twice to chat. Not about Jean specifically. Just to talk. About Zara's work. About a documentary the older woman had watched. About whether Zara had tried a particular John restaurant in her neighborhood. The calls were warm and easy and they lasted longer than Zara expected. And after each one she sat with her phone in her lap feeling something she wasn't supposed to be feeling. That was the thing about this arrangement. It was too easy to forget it was one. Because it was Jean. And she already knew how to be with him. She already knew the shorthand, the rhythm, the particular ease of someone whose company you'd worn smooth over years. The only difference was now there was touching. A hand at the small of her back when they walked into a room. Fingers finding hers while crossing a street, because it was a busy crossing and it was a natural gesture. That was what she told herself. His shoulder against hers during long dinners with his family, which had started happening weekly, and had started feeling less like performance and more like just Sunday. She noted every single one. She filed none of them away properly. And she kept sleeping on one side of the bed during family stayovers while he slept on the floor, and pretended this was all completely straightforward. The unraveling came on a Thursday evening. They were at his family's home, a regular dinner now, grandmother at the head of the table, his father telling a long story about a business summit in Geneva that had veered off course. Zara was listening and laughing in the right places when his grandmother said, out of nowhere, setting her chopsticks down and folding her hands with the gentle authority of a woman who waited until she had something worth saying. I have been watching you both. Everyone at the table quieted slightly. She looked at Zara first. Then at Jean. You are not performing, she said simply. This is real. Jean was very still. Zara picked up her water glass. The older woman shook her head softly, not unkindly. I've watched my grandson with many people over many years. She looked at Zara. The way he looks at you is not something a person performs. Zara set the glass down. She kept her expression perfectly even. It was one of the hardest things she had ever done. After dinner, they stood together in the garden while the others cleared the table inside. The evening was cool. Zara had her arms folded across herself. Jean stood beside her, hands in his pockets, looking at the garden. That was he started. I know, she said. He was quiet. She was quiet. The air between them had weight. Can I ask you something, he said. She looked at the garden and said, depends on what it is. What you said the first night. About your father. She pressed her lips together. He turned his head slightly toward her. That was real. It wasn't a statement. It was close to one. She breathed. Yes, she said quietly. He was quiet for another moment. He said, I've been thinking about it since that night. She didn't answer. He said, Zara. She turned to look at him. He was looking at her with something she recognized from the gallery. That expression she had filed away and refused to examine. She felt the examination coming anyway. He opened his mouth. His phone rang. He looked at it. She exhaled. He declined the call. Looked back at her. She shook her head once, a small motion. Don't, she said. He looked at her. Just, she said, not tonight. He read her face. He nodded once. They went back inside. 3 days later she told him it was over. She came to his office this time. She sat down across from him. And she was very calm and very clear, and she said that she had done what he asked, and she was glad he had the company secured now. And she thought they should wind it down before it became something that couldn't be undone. He sat across from her and listened without interrupting. She appreciated that. Then he said, is that what you actually want? She looked at him. Jean. Yes, she said. He said nothing for a moment. Then, okay. She stood up. She shook his hand, which was strange and formal and completely absurd for two people who had slept in the same room 6 times in the last 2 months. But she did it anyway because she needed something that felt like a boundary. He let her. She walked out. She got into the elevator. The doors closed. She leaned back against the wall and looked at the ceiling and told herself she had done the right thing and almost believed it. She didn't see him for 2 weeks. Her office moved on. The flowers on her desk dried, and she didn't replace them. His grandmother called once and Zara let it ring, and then felt guilty about it for 3 days. Dami sent a voice note that was 20 seconds long and consisted entirely of the word, Zara, said in 17 different tones. She did not respond to that either. She was fine. She was working hard and eating properly and going to sleep at reasonable hours. And she was completely fine. She was at the airport on a Friday morning, headed to a client event in Lagos, rolling her carry-on toward the gate, braids pinned up, coffee in hand, when she heard someone say her name. She stopped, turned around. Seojin was walking toward her. He was in a suit that was slightly disheveled in a way his suits never were. His hair was less controlled than usual. He was breathing like someone who had been moving fast for a while. She stood very still and watched him approach, and felt the entire 2 weeks collapse to nothing. He stopped in front of her. He was catching his breath. "Zara," he said. She said, "What are you doing here?" "I need to say something," he said. "I've been trying to find the right way to say it for 2 weeks, and there isn't one, so I'm just going to say it." His jaw was tight. She waited. "I don't want to pretend," he said. "Not anymore. Not in the direction you think." She stared at him. He looked at her, direct and a little wrecked in the way of someone who had finally stopped managing what they let show. "I'm not good at missing people," he said. "I am not built for it. And these last 2 weeks have been, Zara. I had no idea." Her throat tightened. "You knew before I did," he said. "Didn't you?" She didn't answer immediately. He said, "The things you said to my grandfather, that wasn't a performance. It was never just a performance. And I was sitting right next to you like an absolute fool." He exhaled. "Tell me I'm wrong." She looked at him for a long time. Her gate was behind her. The boarding announcement had started. She could hear it distantly. She said, "You're not wrong." Something moved across his face. She said, "But you should know. I am not easy. I work too much and I know exactly what I want and I don't operate well when people are inconsistent with me." He nodded. "I know," he said. "I've known you for 10 years. She said, "You left wherever you were to come here and say this." He said, "I did." She said, "That was a little insane." He said, "Yes." She looked at him one more time. Then she reached down, picked up the handle of her carry-on, turned it around and walked back toward him. He stood completely still, like a man who understood the significance of what was happening and did not want to move wrong inside it. She stopped in front of him. "I have a flight," she said. "But it's a long trip and I need someone to be irritating at me the whole way, or I'll work the entire time." He looked at her. She raised an eyebrow. He reached out slowly and took the carry-on handle from her hand, and they walked back toward the check-in desk together. She did not get on that flight alone. He bought a ticket in 9 minutes, which she knew because she counted. They sat side by side through the boarding process and through the waiting, and she worked on her laptop for the first hour, and he read and occasionally said something that made her respond, and then made her laugh. At some point her head ended up against his shoulder. She was tired. He didn't move. She closed her eyes. When she woke up, they were somewhere over the sea and his hand was over hers on the armrest, loosely, the way you hold something you don't want to lose. She looked at it. Then at him. He was still reading. He looked down at her. She looked back at the window. Neither of them moved. They got married 7 months later. The ceremony was held at a garden estate just outside of Seoul with about 60 people and no press and a florist Zara had worked with twice before who did everything in white and gold and deep green. Zara wore a structured ivory gown with an open back, and her braids fully down for the first time that whole year. Seojin saw her at the end of the aisle, and stopped walking for 1 full second. His father, standing beside him, quietly said, "Don't just stand there." He walked. His grandmother was in the front row in pale blue, and did not cry during the vows, but absolutely cried during the first dance, and spent the rest of the evening informing everyone within earshot that she had known from the beginning. Dami gave a speech that was equal parts genuine and completely unhinged, referencing incidents Zara would have preferred stayed undocumented, and received a standing ovation. At the end of the night Seojin and Zara sat at the edge of the terrace while the last of their guests drifted between the lights, and she leaned into his side the way she had learned she was allowed to, and thought about the office and the knee on the floor and the airport and the armrest. She thought about the 10 years and the walls she had built, and how quickly they had come down once she stopped holding them up. He turned his head. She looked up. He said nothing. He didn't need to. She already knew. 5 years after that, the chaos had a face. Their daughter, Nadia, was 4 years old, had Zara's eyes and Seo Jin's complete inability to do anything quietly, and had recently decided that mornings began at 5:30, and that everyone in the household was obligated to agree. She was standing in the garden now between her parents, in a white dress with one sock on, squinting at the camera with the patient skepticism of a child who had been told to smile many times and had formed her own opinion about it. Smile, Nadia, Zara said. I am smiling. She was not smiling. She was doing something philosophical with her face. Nadia, Seo Jin said, crouching down beside her. Show me your happy face. Nadia looked at him with great seriousness. This is my happy face. Zara turned away very quickly, and became extremely interested in the garden hedge. She felt him looking over their daughter's head at her. She turned back. They looked at each other, and the thing that passed between them was the same thing that had been passing between them for years now. Familiar and unhurried and full. Nadia reached up and took one of each of their hands without being asked. The photographer counted down. They looked at the camera. And there they all were. And that is where we'll leave them today. If this story settled somewhere in your chest, if you smiled at the airport, if you knew from the moment she said fine in that office that she was already finished, let us know in the comments. Tell us your favorite moment. Tell us where you're watching from. If you're new here, welcome, and please subscribe so you never miss a story. Give the video a like so more people find it. We'll see you in the next one.